Hey class, in this video I'm going to wrap up Martin Buber and I'm going to focus on one major concept in I and Thou that we haven't introduced yet, and that is Buber's discussion of the eternal thou. And the eternal thou is a interesting and difficult concept in Buber's thought. It's easy to say, well, the eternal thou is just Buber's word for God, but that's not entirely correct. And it's fair to say that if Buber simply meant God, he would have said God. Before we get into that question, we have to say, what is the function of the eternal thou in his thinking? Well, we have the I-thou relationship, right? And that is the relationship of dialogue that is aware that the other person is fundamentally mysterious and can only be encountered as a kind of ongoing revealing of their mystery rather than as something that can be controlled, calculated, predicted, and generally objectified. In the I-thou relationship, you should also come to realize the same thing about yourself, that you are also, fundamentally mysterious. So where does the eternal thou fits in? Well, we might say, what is it about you that's mysterious? What is it that makes me mysterious or makes you mysterious, right? It's not anything that we do. It's not like, oh, I'm mysterious because I keep secrets, or I'm mysterious because I lurk in dark alleys smoking cigarettes with my collars up or something like that. That's not what makes us mysterious. What makes us mysterious, Buber thinks, is that there is a trace or a shadow of the eternal thou on every other person, every other thou that one has the I-thou experience with. The eternal thou is what makes the I-thou experience possible. The existence of the eternal thou is the condition for the possibility of I-thou experiences. Without the eternal thou, we really are just a bunch of things, a bunch of objects that sooner or later will be reduced to predictable and calculative functions. So what is the eternal thou ultimately? Well, in a sense, we can go all the way back to Plato. Remember in the symposium, Socrates recounts his conversation with Diotima. And Diotima gives Socrates this story or this vision of an ascent of love, right? From first love for the individual person, to love of institutions, to love of larger institutions, to love of ideas, to ultimately the love of the form of the beautiful itself, right? Not any individual beautiful thing, but the beauty itself that all beautiful things participate in. Right, so in Plato, the vector of love is away from individual people towards this higher idea of the beautiful or the good that ultimately transcends any individual person, but also, if you dive deep into Plato, is also what makes possible that initial love to begin with. Because if you go back to Plato and the dialogue between Socrates and Diotima, what is it that first attracts one person to love another? Beauty. What is the ultimate goal? Beauty itself. The beauty of the other is participating in the beautiful itself. In a similar way, we could say that the thou of the other person is participating in the thou of the eternal thou. Right, so in the same way that beautiful things are beautiful because they participate in the beauty of the beautiful itself, according to Plato, you and I and others can be thous, are mysterious, we might say, because we participate in the mystery of the eternal thou. Right, so far so good. But, and here's where there's a crucial difference between Plato and Buber. For Plato, as one ascends up the ladder towards the beautiful itself, one is less interested in individual people and so on and so forth. Right? Ultimately, the goal is to be sort of alone with the idea of the beautiful, or the form of the beautiful. For Buber, that's not the case. If you try to be alone with the eternal thou and abandon your individual I-thou relationships, it's never going to work. For Buber, the only way to get to the eternal thou is through you and I. It's only through dialogical relationships with each other that we can experience the eternal thou. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, can I be really, really smart like Socrates and just understand the eternal thou by myself without having to be around other people? Well, here's why Buber says you can't. Because the eternal thou is not an it. Therefore, it can't be apprehended by rational, calculative thought. Right? It doesn't matter how smart you are when it comes to your relationship with the eternal thou. What matters is how dialogical you are. It's a question of attitude, not a question of intelligence. And because it's a question of attitude and not a question of intelligence, and the attitude that it requires is an I-thou attitude, it is impossible to get the experience of the eternal thou without having that I-thou attitude towards ones that one meets in the world. So Buber's approach is, I think, fruitfully contrasted with Plato because it's similar in sort of this hierarchical sense, but it's fundamentally different because it's not as rationalistic. What is it that we're experiencing when we experience the eternal thou? Well, firstly, Buber is going to say, generally speaking, we only experience the eternal thou by means of our I-thou relationships with other people. That's why I say the eternal thou is like a shadow. One experiences it through others. What's ultimately mysterious about me, or what's ultimately mysterious about you, is that we both participate in this ultimate mystery that Buber calls the eternal thou. So what is that ultimate mystery? Well, partly you could say it's God, and Buber is a religious thinker in his own idiosyncratic way. If we were to say it's God, that would perhaps be more misleading than helpful, because we would then just immediately think about, well, what I think God is, that's what the eternal thou is. So I think it's better to say that the eternal thou is the mystery of existence, right? That the thing about us that's fundamentally mysterious, that fundamental mystery that we participate in, is being. It's that we exist. On the one hand, it's easy to miss that mystery. That's why it's so easy to be in the I-it attitude and just take all these things for granted as existing things. But if you think about it for a minute, it's really weird that we exist. If you calculate the odds of me standing here making a video and you watching it, those are infinitesimally small odds. The fact that everything fell into place over millennia or eons to get me existing here and now and you existing where you are right now is weird. So the fact that I exist, that you exist, that any one of us exists at all is weird and mysterious. If any small thing in the past millennia had been different, then we wouldn't be here right now. Being attuned to that weirdness is part of what Buber wants us to recognize. Because once we recognize how weird it is that we exist, then we should also recognize how, for lack of a better term, lucky we are to exist, and how lucky we are to exist with each other. The world as we live in it did not have to be this way. It could have been other ways. But here we are, here's you, here's me, we're here together, and if we're Buberian about it, we'll meet, we'll have dialogue, and that dialogue will recognize this weirdness. And I'm not entirely happy with how I just put it, because I was using the language of odds and calculate the odds and things, and that's still kind of I-ish. So let's go a little farther with the weirdness of existence. It is weird or strange or inexplicable, really, that anything exists. And I'm not here talking about the, physics trying to explain the Big Bang or anything like that. I'm just saying, if you pause your day for a moment and think about it, the fact that you exist and that you are in this world and that you can taste things and smell things and see things and do all of this stuff is amazing. We should be amazed that we exist. We should be amazed that we meet each other. And that sort of amazement, that awareness of how odd it is that we exist and what a gift it is, to say that existence or that being is a gift only means that we are not the cause of our own existences. Right? I did not cause myself to exist. I did not cause the world that I live in to exist. I did not cause the air that I breathe to exist. All of the things that I have around me, I may have bought some of these things, but I didn't cause them to exist. Ultimately, they are a gift. And where did that gift come from? What is the ultimate cause of all of this existence? Even if you don't answer it, just ask that question. What is the ultimate cause of all this existence around me? What is the cause of being? Don't answer the question. Just sit with that question for a while, and that will give you the feeling of the mystery that Buber is getting at when he talks about the thou being fundamentally mysterious. And if you sit with that for a little while longer, think not about how weird is it that this thing exists or that I exist or that you exist, but think about whatever it is could be the source of existence. If being is a gift, who, what, whatever is the giver of that gift. And sit with that for a while. And that'll give you a sense of the eternal thou. And now what Buber thinks is that if you sit with the one about just how weird it is that I exist or you exist or one of these tools exists, you will eventually get to also thinking about the mysteriousness of existence as such, of being as such, and that will lead you to an awareness of the mysteriousness of the source of being, and that is the eternal thou. And because the source of being is ultimately a mystery, all the individual beings are ultimately a mystery. However, it's easy for us to forget this because normally when I come in here in my garage to work, I'm just like, I need this tool, I need that tool, I need to do this, I need to do that. I'm not thinking about the mystery of their existence, right? I'm coming in here in an I-it mood. And that's fine, right? But to go back to the it world that we were talking about in class, as the it world grows, we become more and more accustomed to thinking solely in terms of the it world, and solely in terms of I-it relationships. We're so busy that we don't have time to contemplate the mystery of being. And because we don't have that time, we don't think about it, and we forget about the mystery. And we go through life, we go through the world in a one or two dimensional way, where everything is flat. Everything is easily understood and digested. There's nothing that escapes us. Everything can be put into a chart or a diagram. You can run the stats, break it down, and find out what you want to know and classify people or things this way, that way, the other way, and that's all you need to know about them. We get so busy that begins for us to pass for knowledge. So what does this have to do with love and loneliness? There's a couple things. First, Buber thinks that in the I-it relationship, we're, in a sense, all basically lonely. As the it world is growing, as we become more and more accustomed to living entirely in terms of the it, we are making ourselves more and more lonely. Even if we have lots of people around us. Even if I have tons of followers on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. Even if I'm doing all of those things because I'm doing it in the I-it, I'm fundamentally lonely. And I'm lonely in the sense that I'm not encountering the mystery of other people. I'm only encountering other people as things. For Buber to overcome our loneliness, what he calls in another essay our solitude, we have to meet people in dialogue, which involves everything I was just saying about the thou and the eternal thou. That's the only way we're going to overcome our loneliness. This does not mean, for Buber, that in overcoming our loneliness, that I am going to be around a bunch of people. I might only be around one person, but if that one person is a thou and not an it, then then I've overcome that loneliness. So to go back to Plato, one of the, perhaps like for the purposes of this class, I mean, obviously there are a lot of differences between Buber and Plato, but for the purposes of this class, one of the biggest differences between Buber and Plato is that for Plato, when one gets to the form of the beautiful, you don't need other people anymore. All you need is a form of the beautiful. You could be alone on an island, contemplating the form of the beautiful, and loving the form of the beautiful, and you're good. For Buber, you always need other people. You always need to have this kind of relationship with others. Even if you somehow were devoting your life to the eternal thou, you would still need relationships with other people. Even monks live in communities. Even the most hermity of hermits will get together with other hermits once in a while. Because to contemplate the eternal thou, or to have a relationship with the eternal thou, or an experience of the eternal thou, one has to get there through other people. That's going to round off our discussion of Buber. So for Buber, there are four fundamental concepts. The I-you or I-thou relationship, the I-it relationship, then the it world, and then finally the eternal thou, which we've been talking about today. Those are the four basic concepts that emerge from I and Thou, the book we've been looking at. If you dive deeper into Buber's work, there's obviously more things that he talks about in other essays, but in the purposes of I and Thou, it's those four fundamental things.